Hasan Abi is a very, very virulent anti-Israel, probably anti-Semitic sort of influencer and talking head, propagandist, whatever you want to call him. And he was confronted at Cambridge University just now by a redheaded student about his statements about October 7th, his lack of empathy. Check out this exchange.
But I'm sure
What? No, I'm used to it.
I guess the thing I was talking a little bit about was, I know you're not a fan of, I'm not a fan of him either, but, Richie Torres sent a big letter. But
oh, God.
But in particular, there were some comments in there about sort of dismissing, a lot of people did feel very upset at the time, I remember seeing it, about dismissing Wham! October 7th as rape fantasies, rape hallucinations. I mean, the UN has gone, checked.
Yeah,
verified.
no, you know what's ironic? You want to know what's ironic about that? So that was a 17-second clip that Richie Torres got from a group of people that are like, trying to present this narrative that I am a vicious anti-Semite that is a rape denialist. And what's really interesting about that clip is that I went back because I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And I went back and I looked at the 17-second clip that he put in that. And it was actually from a broader conversation where I was arguing against someone who was denying rapes. And I was like, no, I think that there is a very high likelihood that sexual assaults occurred. And I even brought up the UN report that you're suggesting that that there was at least one documented instance of first-hand account testimony from one of the hostages that sexual assault had happened, and that there is no reason to disparage or to claim that it did not happen when there is at least evidence that it did, and that it had not changed the dynamic of genocide for me even a little bit. And I think
that the way in which you said that to a lot of people sounded very, very dismissive, especially to people who, had relatives who were perhaps murdered or taken away, or had felt that, the loss of life on that day.
So let me ask you this question.
Traumatic for the Jewish community.
Let me ask you this question. Now that you know the broader context, do you feel as though, do you feel like you were maybe duped? I don't want to say duped, but that you saw this that was very clearly out of context. Does that change your opinion a little bit, or do you feel like I'm running defense?
I'm very much on the sort of, I've always been on the pro-Palestine side of this. I'm a left-leaning person, so I never looked at what I saw and said this is justification for blockade, genocide, anything like that. But I did see,
So this guy's on the pro-Palestine side, and even he is being offended by this sort of dismissal of October 7th. Even him, that just shows how extreme Hasan Abi is, to the point where even his side is like, whoa, chill out.
I'm also a humanitarian, and I think that it's important when you're trying to solve a conflict or when you're trying to stop violence that you honestly say what happened. And what happened was,
I agree.
Murderous militants went in to a music festival and murdered hundreds of teenagers in cold blood, and often massacred and mutilated them in ways that we have on camera. And that is deeply traumatic to me. And I guess this was linking to a broader point that, yes, I understand this whole thing about there is context to this, and you can't just sort of suggest any violent action is justifiable against someone if they don't hold views you like. But this is endemic.
Do you think I maintain that position?
It doesn't.
But do you think I maintain that position? Do you think that I think that it was wholeheartely justifiable?
I think certainly you haven't been very clear in your condemnations at times, and I've watched what you've said.
Okay.
It doesn't seem, for example, in the course of your talk, you didn't mention what happened on October 7th once.
Yeah.
You mentioned it as the start of the conflict. You didn't mention...
I don't even think it's the start of the conflict. I actually, if you recall...
So in a talk about Israel and Palestine, about the war currently going on in the Middle East, he fails to mention October 7th once. What does that tell you about it? What does that tell you about how intellectually dishonest these people are? To just brush over October 7th like it never happened when you're talking about the current war is insanity. I don't know how you can go for 2 hours, however long this speech was, and just not talk about October 7th. Insanity.
Started the conversation even before the inception of the State of Israel. There's a deliberate reason for why I did that, because I think it's important to understand the historical context in which violent resistance.
There's no context for murdering hundreds of teenagers, is there?
Yes, I think there's always context. Just like there's context.
Justified?
I don't think it's a contextual justification. I think it's offering background and analysis. Analysis is not justification. I mean, this is
wait, so he goes back on his word. First he says, no, that's not my position. Oh, wait, no, actually it is. Actually, I do think that there is a context where doing this is justifiable. We're committing the horrid acts of October 7th is, relatively justifiable because of Israel's actions previously.
Deliberative body, right? We're in a space for free speech and debate, and I think that this is actually, ironically, one of the things that I don't like about debate is that there is a woeful misinterpretation that exists in this space, and that especially when we talk about certain things, like certain subjects that are very difficult to broach in an open and honest manner, I think a lot gets lost in the nuance. And I think you understand where I'm coming from when I talk about this, like that October 7 is, I've never said that October 7 is like the inception or the first stage in what has unfolded. I think that it's important to understand the context in which violent resistance has evolved, whether it be Hamas or whether it be any militancy against like overarching oppressive colonial actions.
But I suppose what I'm saying to you is there's time for nuance, and there's also time to say something is unequivocally evil and something is unequivocally unjustifiable. And I'm wondering why you can say that correctly about the wealth of Israeli atrocities. But to actually fix this conflict and gain trust with people, you need to say that unequivocally about the murder of hundreds of teenagers at the Supernova Music Festival, their mutilation and often their rape. I don't know why you can't say that.
I don't. First of all, in terms of using the language of mutilation and rape, and also consistently saying that there is a contextual justification for it, I think the violence that states engage in, specifically an apartheid state, which you agree is Israel's an apartheid state. Okay, so the violence that an apartheid state engages in is oftentimes considered to be invisible. All of the violence that has unfolded on October 7, I myself have also maintained the position that any kind of violence against civilians is completely unjustifiable. But I think it's more productive to at least be a resilient voice that, especially in the West, that tries to explain that these aren't barbaric monsters, that these are horrifying atrocities that they did, right? But that it is not coming out of a place of this antiquated anti-Semitic tendencies, or that they wanted to go out and like do mass rapes, or any number of different ways in which people have, I think, in a very unhelpful way, tried to claim that there is no emancipatory ambition here, and that there is no valid interest in wanting to be rid of Israeli sovereignty.
Do you think that...
So what he just said there was that Hamas are freedom fighters. In short, he said that basically Hamas aren't savages. They aren't anti-Semitic. They aren't looking to destroy the Jewish state. They just want emancipation for their people. So he called Hamas freedom fighters. So he's saying that it's not justifiable, and then 3 minutes later saying, oh, wait, no, they're actually, essentially freeing their people from Israeli oppression.
By invading the Gaza Strip, that they were not motivated by anti-Semitism, given the fact that they were murdering civilians indiscriminately.
Invading the Gaza Strip?
By invading from the Gaza Strip into Israel.
Yeah.
Do you think that they were not motivated by anti-Semitism, given that they were murdering citizens in... No. That is remarkable.
No,
the entire logic of Hamas
I don't.
on anti-Semitism.
No.
And if you don't recognize that, then you're never going to build any trust with the Jewish community. If you have people who are out there and suggesting that your people...
You see that shrug? He's like, I don't need to build trust in the Jewish community, because that's not his audience. His audience is full of extremists and people that actually want Jews finished, that are actually anti-Semitic, just like him.
Differently.
No, I think this is interesting, because it suggests that you don't have a moral universalism. What I've heard from you is this very eloquent, and I agree with it, moral condemnation of the atrocities. But when we talk about the murder of gay people en masse in Yemen, when we talk about, for example, Tibet's oppression under China, or when we talk about what Hamas has done to gay people within there, or what they do to Jewish hostages, you enter this contextual blather. And it strikes me that these...
Because you want to know why? You want to know why? Because Israel has killed significantly larger numbers of gay Palestinians than Hamas has. And that is precisely why I think it's a universally unproductive conversation to consistently talk about the many different moral failings, especially when I look at this with my own personal background, with the understanding that reactionary movements grow when there are outside forces that are invading a country. This is something that I actually talked about with respect to Ukraine as well, that while there were many movements within Ukraine that were constantly fighting against paramilitary groups that had started off as like offshoots of football hooligans, the Azov Brigade being one of them, that once Ukraine was invaded by Russia, that the inevitable violence was going to make all of the most right-wing reactionary forces the emancipatory forces that were going to dominate the country in perpetuity. We saw this with Iran. The destabilization of Iran, backed by the CIA, caused the Ayatollah to overtake the country, because in most circumstances, when Western forces or an outside force is coming into your country, you don't care about who is actually fighting back. You just want the pain to stop. You want the violence to end. And I examine this across the board in the exact same vein. When a larger, more powerful country meddles in the affairs of a smaller country, no matter how big or small. Yeah, Iran, exactly. Iran is a perfect example of this. I think that the Iranian destabilization and the implementation of the Shah regime is quite literally the reason why the Ayatollahs were able to gain momentum.
The intervention of Iran in the other powers, but in terms of the broader problem with that.
But do you understand where I'm coming from? Do you because there is universality there, and I think the universality is hard to grasp, especially if you've grown up in the United Kingdom, or if you've grown up in America. It's very difficult for people in the Western world to shed themselves of Western chauvinist frameworks and engage in, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but engage in what I have seen as pinkwashing by consistently talking about the internal dynamics of any kind of resistance group, when in fact we do not make those considerations for many of our allies, and it's not even something that is remotely brought up in this conversation as far as like universality goes. I've never heard anybody go, we got to stop giving Saudi Arabia weapons because of the horrifying treatment of gay people. I still think it's unjustifiable, just like it's unjustifiable in Yemen. But ultimately, the way I look at it, if there is a much larger, much more powerful country that is getting unlimited weapons from the most powerful country on the planet, and they are engaging in wholesale slaughter, I think analyzing or interpreting the dynamic of like Hamas and gay people in that regard is ultimately not only unproductive, but also it's not something that is within our realm of power even. I think that these countries, my country, Turkey, for example, will inevitably, once they have breathing room, have the time and opportunity to be able to advocate for their own civil liberties. Because at the end of the day, the gay people that Hamas could potentially harm are still gay Palestinians. Does that make sense? And we have the benefit of living in the UK or in the United States of America, where we have undergone this process of civil liberties and advocacy for civil liberties, and be able to overcome these issues like the structural hurdles, the systematic discrimination that gay people face. Like, I mean, think about Alan Turing.
I think there are two issues. Sorry if I just could respond quickly.
If I could just say, you've been debating for a very long time, and by all means.
Sorry, I don't mean
No, it's fine.
I would love to sort of offer some of Cambridge Union's sort of fantastic hospitality, maybe for British culture, maybe.
Sorry, yeah.
All right, so that was the end of that. Basically, the red-haired man, Lefty, actually presented a pretty good argument. He's just using contextual blather to essentially, support October 7th, or say that October 7th doesn't matter. And he's trying to ignore those atrocities by going on a 5-minute rant about universality and all these other BS words, as well as like the oppressor-oppressed narrative. Oh, what Israel is so strong, so whatever Hamas does is insignificant. Israel is so unbelievably backed by the U.S., so Hamas is robbed of agency. Another thing he tries to bring up, which is laughable, is this sort of, Hamas will start caring about its gay people and about civil liberties once they take power. You see, once they take over and have their own place, then they'll care. Once they have agency, once they become a state, then they'll care about civil liberties. Think about how laughable that is. These are the same people that are avowed to the destruction of both Israel and America. They want the West gone. They are not looking to inculcate the Western values that we all cherish into their society. They're looking to end Western society. And Hasan Abi probably knows that and probably doesn't care because his fan base is full of extremists and anti-Semites just like him. For more, subscribe to this channel. If you want to help us make more of these videos, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/JewishUncensored. That's buymeacoffee.com/JewishUncensored. Thank you and have a good one.